Hey there guys, it's over here, and today we'll be looking at the Mclaren MP4-28 in more detail. And after looking at many different videos and articles about the Mclaren car, I'm decided to make this sort of different video that I usually do. It's more factual based on the McLaren, looking in depth into some of its good points and how they're going to be trying to improve it and what's gone wrong so far and why it's gone wrong. So let's first get into the positives of. I know there, big shock. There are some positives of the McLaren car. So first off, the exhaust system they use. Now, McLaren and Red Bull both pioneered the Krewella system, exhaust system, which basically allows them to get a lot more downforce through the diffuser, and it does this by basically the Krewella effect means that, well, it talks about it in terms of a liquid, but you've got to see when air is moving that fast. When an F1 car moves that fast through the air, the air is basically like a liquid substance. So the Krewella effect basically states the liquid, if it moves over a curved surface, it will continue on that curved path. So basically they've used that, and as the exhaust gases come out, they've put like a little flap on the side of it that's curved upwards and then downwards, and that curve effect basically means that the air moving at that fast speed acts like a liquid and basically sticks to that surface and curves round in that direction, and the downward direction at the end means that they're pointing it at the gap between the rear tyre and the rear wing. Now that gap usually has a lot of turbulent air coming off the rear wheels, just spinning up, and that's going to affect the downforce because the diffuser air is getting disrupted. But because of this exhaust gas coming through that gap, it effectively makes like a seal, a vacuum in between the rear wheel and the rear wing, and that allows clean, untouched air to get into the diffuser and not get disrupted by the rear wheel air. And people are trying to adopt this now all the way through the grid. Williams tried to do it, Caterham tried to do it, but Caterham I think got flagged up because they did it a bit too much. They literally nearly covered the whole exhaust in one big circular flap, which was it's against the rules. They literally left like a gap, and that's not allowed. Yeah, and so that's a really good technique for getting downforce. I think that's a very good thing about the McLaren. Also, the McLaren compared to last year, in terms of the development, there's a lot of room for development because they've gone with the higher nose. They usually don't. They usually McLaren, even back in like 2006 and stuff, they used to have like a nice sort of concept of low chassis, a bit low riding in terms of how the chassis was. But now they've gone for the high one, and they use the the little modesty panel to cover up the indecent and frankly ugly as crap step nose. So that allows more air to get under the car, and then they can feed that to the underside. But getting onto the underside now, getting onto the problems of McLaren. Basically, the McLaren car, in essence, is a good car. It just doesn't. It's not working how they thought it would, and that's the big problem. So at Australia, you might have seen the car just looking a bit on edge, not looking very stable and not very comfortable. And this was basically because the air that goes under the McLaren car, and this was at Australia, I'm talking about, when the air used to go under the car, basically it wouldn't. Basically, the underside's made so that the air flows straight to the diffuser and all the side parts that it need. But the air was dispersing instead, which basically meant there wasn't enough downforce at that low ride height. But that basically meant the car got lifted up because there was so much air just bunging around. The car was getting lifted up onto the springs, and basically because the car got lifted up onto the springs, it was in a sort of kind of a zone where the air could travel well into the diffuser. And because that happened, more downforce came on, so the car got lowered again. But then you can see where I'm going, because it got lowered because of the good downforce from above. It goes back to that same area where the air was dispersing, and then it goes back up. The air can travel, goes back, the car goes back down, air disperses, it goes back up, and that's why you could see like big oscillations at the front of that McLaren. I think especially there was a clip, I think, of Sergio Perez coming down to one of the corners just before the hairpin into sector 2, and it was just literally vibrating like mad on the front, and that's because of the air bouncing that car up and down. Now, this is made worse because Australia was a street circuit. Because, well, not a street, but it's a park. It's not a purpose-built circuit. It doesn't have nice cambered tracks, roads, and it's really bumpy. And the McLaren does not ride bumps very well. It doesn't sit well on the track, especially at street circuits. But at Malaysia, that's why we saw a big improvement. One, obviously they brought a few upgrades, but also because they could run the car sort of near where they wanted it to, so that there wasn't the oscillation as much as in Australia. And so what they'll be trying to do for China is trying to get it into that optimum zone where there's enough downforce on this underneath the car for it to work without it without it making oscillations and stopping that happening. And basically, this goes back to Jerez, where we saw Jenson Button putting out a stormer of a lap in Jerez and Felipe Massa saying it was very impressive indeed. But Mark Hughes of Sky Sports has said that he probably suspects that the McLaren was running really low. Like the F1 car, you want to try and ride it as low as you want, but you can't ride it to a certain height because it just won't work in the race, and therefore in the qualifying due to parc fermé conditions. But Jerez, obviously, testing, there's no race to do, so they probably lowered it lower than the optimum level they want in a race, lower to sort of kind of get even more downforce, and that's why the lap time was there. But they can't do that on a normal weekend, because if you run it that low, it won't work in the race, because the amount of fuel they put on in that car, it will get even lower, and it'll just basically be touching the ground. You don't want it to be touching the ground, you just want it a tiny like millimetre off the ground for it to really work. So that's why we saw the McLaren actually looking quite good in testing, but it was actually just some nice tricks by McLaren, probably, because they probably knew about it and they were trying to cover it up, perhaps. Getting onto the front wing, Gary Anderson talking quite in depth about the front wing at BBC and criticising how they were doing it. And basically, as you can see on the screen now, hopefully I should have a picture of it, of the front wing. And basically, on the right hand side, the wing flap is at a really tight angle, and that's at the optimum angle they could get, the tightest angle to get that air flowing over the tyre into the side pods, into the turning vanes and everything like that. And they have a little black strip on the top, and that makes even more air just jump up over the tyre, get into the front, get into the side pods. But basically on the left hand side, you've got two partitions just below it. As you can see, hopefully, if I have a picture, I should do. This is going to be awkward if I don't. Yeah, and that one is not as high as it could be. Gary Anderson specifically said that it wasn't at the angle that really could do it at. And the reason they're not doing that is because the underside is not working as properly. Everything is not really working together, so that they need to sacrifice getting more downforce from the front wing to allow more air to go to the undersides and stuff like that, and to the barge boards. They're gonna obviously try and want to fix this for China, because eventually the optimum they would want to do is run both those wing flaps at the optimum, tightest angle they can, highest angle they can, to try and get the most downforce on the car. And that's what Lotus and Red Bull do very well, especially Red Bull. If you look at the front wing detail on Red Bull, it is really amazing, and everything is just, it looks beautiful. It's an engineering beauty, and basically all the flaps are just at the optimum angle, getting that massive downforce load on the front wing, but at the same time it's channeling air to where it needs to be. So basically, in general, the McLaren car, it is a good car, but because of the ride height issue and the air dispersing, they can't place it in the air, if you know what I mean, where they want it to. And because they're not placing it in the air they want it to, they can't, everything else gets affected. They can't run the front wing as they want to, they can't run the rear wing as they want to, probably. They can't run the exhaust, it's affected. Everything is affected by this one issue. It's probably a pretty big issue that the car just gets lifted and oscillates and everything. But obviously, rumours that in China they're working their arse off in these 2 weeks, whereas everyone else might be working sort of okayish. McLaren are really hammering down, trying to get big upgrades to stop this. And well, as a McLaren fan and a Jenson Button fan, I'm hoping that they make a big step forward in China. But others suspect, like Gary Anderson, suspect you won't see such a dramatic change, because there was a significant change from Australia to Malaysia. They probably gained about a second, and he was saying that they probably won't be in China. But also some other contrasting ones saying that they will. So it's all up in the air, but I think McLaren do have a good package underneath all the issues, and if they solve those issues, it is going to be a mega quick car. Once they get it in that sweet spot, it will be challenging the Red Bulls indefinitely. It will be challenging all those front runners, the Lotus, the Ferrari, and it really will be a good car. But it's just a question of how fast they can make those issues go away. Because if it's too long, if it's like maybe like past halfway through the season, no one will be in the championship hunt in McLaren. I mean, yes, McLaren always like to win just anyway. Martin Whitmarsh also saying, would rather win lots of Grand Prix. But, no one's going to be fighting for the championship, and I think that's what Jenson Button and Sergio Perez want. So I'm hoping that they can do that pretty fast. So, guys, hope you've enjoyed this in-depth McLaren video. Give it a like if you did. Comment below on your thoughts, and do you think McLaren will come back to winning ways, perhaps? Or maybe you're quite pessimistic, or maybe you're just not a McLaren fan. You don't want them to come back to winning ways. Yeah, so if you're new, subscribe for weekly F1. I've been Arava. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you guys next week.